Moist Critical just debated Sneako, and it was an absolute mess.
I'm talking about your personal beliefs. Do you think someone in their 20s should be able to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
To someone in their 20s should be, I mean, I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would do it. The maturity for people and the teenagers in the West is getting much worse, but there are...
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for... I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore. Anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Well,
why would I tell them if everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
But they're still, like, they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that.
So I'd like to think that I have a more nuanced view than most of the internet on what makes someone a creep. I've taken a lot of flack for saying that people who are, in my view, not creeps, somehow actually are. Like, I don't think that a 16-year-old dating an 18-year-old makes them a creep, because I think that nuance matters. But right now, a lot of people are being talked about online and accused of a lot of shit. We had the Dr. Disrespect situation where he admitted to talking to a minor inappropriately. We had the Chris Tyson situation where Chris was a huge fan of Shadman and also got into some trouble for some weird shit they were saying around minors, which is not good, to say the least. And I think that both of these people should definitely be condemned for what they did. But one person who's been popping up a lot in the news lately has been Sneako, as he was defending Dr. Disrespect.
Pokimane, your audience is just jerking off watching you, and everybody knows that. And you know it. Look at her. She's looking down saying, stop that. Look at that cringe. She's cringing at her simp fans jerking off on the stream all day, and she's aware of it. And then she has the balls to go say Dr. Disrespect's a terrible person. Bro, this is my problem with this.
They're both bad people, but like that doesn't.
But nobody cancels Pokimane. There's no hate brigade. Everyone's like,
text a 17-year-old.
But she has 13-year-olds jerking off to her, and she's fine with it and monetizing it.
And he also had a very hard time talking about the age of consent and what he thinks it should be. He had a very bad debate where he could not answer where he thinks the law should set the age of consent to be.
Age of consent should be, Sneako.
This is not an important conversation.
No, you don't think kids are not as an important conversation? What do you think the age of consent should be? If you want to be consistent, you don't think anything updates, just tell us what you think it should be.
I think it should be past at a developed age, Dustin.
What is a developed age? If you had to set a law for it, what would you set it? What would you set it about?
It's a developed age.
And with all of this going on, he managed to get Penguinz0, Moist Critical, or Charlie on a stream to debate him. Now, Charlie, as much of a fan of him as I have been in the past, did not perform amazingly in this debate. I think it's clear that he's not a very skilled debater, not his most amazing skill, but I don't really blame him for that because the average person is not watching a lot of autistic debate content online. But regardless of how good or bad he is at this debate, the stuff Sneako was trying to push in this debate was absolutely insane, and Charlie also was trying to push some really dumb shit, and I feel like I have to, call it out a little bit here because he said something here that is, I'm just not cool with.
Oh, in the 1800s, when it was the age of 10, that was fine. Legally back then, they were not a pedophile. Today, legally, they are a pedophile.
Wait, when was the age of consent?
The thing that the conversation starts with is Critical wondering why the age of consent is something that Sneako is so intent on debating, or why he has such an issue with the age of consent in general. Charlie says the age of consent should be an accepted number, meaning 18 years of age should be the age of consent, because when you're 18 years old and you're going to college, you can drive, you're doing very adult things, versus under that age, you're still a kid. Sneako then responds by saying that the age of consent in most states is not 18, which is true. About 30 states in the United States have the age of consent set to 16 years old. Charlie then says, well, yeah, but that mostly applies to Romeo and Juliet laws. Like a 19-year-old dating a 16-year-old is legally not considered bad because obviously they're relatively close in age. And we can recognize that there are exceptions where somebody may be breaking the law, but it's not like a feel-like act, right? Sneako then says he's not arguing to lower the age of consent. He's against the idea entirely. He then points out that in Europe, the age of consent is 16 in a lot of countries. In Brazil, it's 14 years old, I believe. He's basically saying that the law varies from place to place. So he asks Charlie why he believes 18 is the true age of consent to be respected. Charlie then brings up that just because it may be legal in some places, that doesn't mean it's right. Sneako responds by saying, okay, well, I wouldn't really do that. I wouldn't date someone that age, but it has nothing to do with their age. It's because he doesn't hook up with people anymore, and that's his greatest qualm about having sex with someone underage, that it's like out of wedlock. He then claims that even having an age of consent encourages premarital sex somehow. So Charlie says, okay, would you marry a kid?
Okay, so then instead of let's take it away from like premarital sex, would you feel comfortable marrying a 16-year-old? Like, would you meet a 16-year-old with romantic intent if you're in Europe and maybe marry a 16-year-old?
I
Nothing
wouldn't.
sexual.
I probably wouldn't personally, because I don't think that I'd be on the same mental playing field. I like to have intellectual conversations. I like to be with women that are around my same age.
So in his personal life, if he can, for some reason, understand that a 16-year-old is not the same thing as an 18, 19, 20-year-old in most cases, he can see that clearly. But then when it comes to applying it to other people, for some reason, he's like, oh, well, it's fine, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
You know, I think there'd be too much of a gap. But other people, like, if they're able to get along, then I don't see why that's so much of a problem.
Well, the reason why it's a problem is because a 16-year-old does not have the same mental maturity as somebody who is, let's say, 26. They are vastly different at different stages in their life. The 26-year-old has had college, they've had jobs, they've had experiences far beyond the 16-year-old that makes them much more able to make informed decisions about their life. 16-year-olds have had none of that. So I would say it's wrong to have sex with them if you're far older. Even if that 16-year-old may be physically mature, they're not mentally mature. It's as simple as that, and I think Charlie actually makes that point pretty well. But Sneako then starts digging into Charlie's ideology a bit. Charlie says that someone who is 17 years old in 364 days is a kid, but somebody who is one day older is automatically not a kid. And obviously, this is how we treat it legally sometimes, but practically speaking, a one-day difference is not a huge change in maturity, right? And of course, the counter argument someone could make is, okay, well, let's say a 16-year-old is very smart, they've graduated college early, they drive a car. Would you say that you can just date them? And I would say no. But Sneako begins to catch Charlie in some serious traps, and he doesn't do a good job of handling it.
You do admit that that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people
saying,
graduate
on the
high
whole,
school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone as that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like a lot of the things you say, can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because I mean,
I don't
in
think
your
anybody
clips
thinks
that
that.
I played in the video, you were
no
saying
way.
like the age of maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip.
So
like, for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become an adult, correct?
Yeah, legally.
So you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest to, like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
Now, for the purposes of preventing child abuse and a whole host of other issues, I agree that 18 should be the age of consent. Because the problem you can run into if you get rid of that is that you can begin to justify a whole list of other horrible things. Sneako makes the argument that the law should just be abolished entirely, which is just fucking stupid. That's wrong. Typically, people do a good job of governing themselves and regulating their behavior. That's why not everybody walking out on the street is in jail right now. But when someone does not and they harm someone else, the government exists in this case to step in and prevent that harm or punish the harm perpetuating it, so it sets an example to others that they cannot partake in that harm. The government's not always right. There's a lot of bad shit they do, but in an ideal society, this is why they exist. There needs to be some kind of rule to the land because people on their own cannot govern themselves sometimes because they're stupid. And the law especially needs to exist when it comes to children and exploitation. Children are literally the most sacred thing we have as a society, okay? They are literally the future of our world. The things they do now and the ideas they learn, the experiences they have will in the future change the world, okay? And their children will change the world after we are dead. Before they're even able to be adults, we should not be letting them be abused by people who should know better when they're powerless to stop it and can't understand the ramifications of theirs and others' actions. But Sneako then brings up the, oh, well, in the 1800s, we did this.
Right, 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of marriage.
Yeah, but we can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we play by those rules? Because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying, you're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10 and the UK was 7. Right, so if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, then the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college, they don't leave the house until this age. Their brains don't develop until they're 25. Your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money. They're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you could use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
I think that'd be totally understandable. Like, I
Right.
think
So
that's
does
fine.
that, so then
Like,
does that make
if you
so then does that make anybody who sleeps with an under 25-year-old, does that now make them a pedophile?
No, I don't think necessarily that makes them a retroactive.
So then what's a
But it's an accepted definition of 18 for a long time.
But this is where Charlie really starts to lose me. 25 years old being the age of consent would be dumb. It just would be. And you should not be okay with the government raising the age of consent to 25, and now if you're 30 and you bang someone who's 24, you're now a creep legally. You shouldn't be charged for that. It doesn't make any sense. The appeal to whatever the law says being right and true is dumb. Because obviously there should be a law in place, but that being the only thing that your morality rests on is retarded. There are laws that have existed in the past that will exist in the future that are dumb, and I don't care about breaking them. If you're going to defend a certain law, you should be able to justify why you defend that law. And the idea that because the law says it, it's true is dumb. But then Charlie comes back and really tries to see how low Sneako will go.
Do you see why this is like a weird take to have though? Like I don't think you're coming at this from a place of you wanting to f a 15-year-old, are you? To go back to that question, is 12 too young? Do you think 12 is too young?
I think 12 is too young for me.
For you? So you wouldn't be upset if you found out that a 20-year-old banged a 12-year-old for any reason other than the fact it's out of wedlock. You wouldn't be like, that's messed up. If a 20-year-old married a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, you wouldn't say that's messed up. Sneako just spent a lot of time rightfully calling out Chris Tyson for being a horrible person. Chris didn't even bang a 12-year-old. Is what Chris did only bad because it's out of wedlock? I'm sensing some serious inconsistency here. But Sneako then decides to bite the bullet and finally say that 12 is too young, which, I mean, thank God he did that.
I think 12 is too young for me. Yes.
Well, for you, do you think 12 is too young in general? I feel like that should be an easy answer.
12 is too young in general, correct? Because,
Okay.
yes.
And I don't
But
think you're coming at this from that
define,
angle.
but what you're saying, your definition of adult is not even the actual definition. Do you know what the definition of child is? Like, anybody watching this can Google it. You can Google it too. The definition of child is somebody who has not reached puberty yet. That's the definition.
Yeah, and then you get into like the abibophile or whatever as opposed to file, and those are all.
I don't know. I have no idea what those terms are. I don't know what that is, but I'm saying that's the actual definition. When somebody reaches maturity, it's based off of biological and physical maturity.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
So it varies for everybody. Adulthood is not something that you can set in stone because it's different for the entire world. I moved out when I was 14. A lot of people don't move out until they're 25. I went through puberty when I was 17. A lot of people went through puberty when they were 13, 14, 15. It changes for everybody. So for you to say that this is the set in stone age and say you're a pedophile if it's under 18, and then if you're over 18, you're fine. Well, then that's a weird line that doesn't make sense. So you're going to say this person is a terrible person if they're 17 years old, 364 days, and right after that, they're good to go. Well, it changes for everybody. So we have to have something, a definition. We have to be realistic with everybody. Well, we don't. But you're saying we, but that's not even the case in the country we live in.
And while people do mature at different rates, and I would not call someone who is 18 and dates a 16-year-old creepy in any way, the reason that the law exists is to make it legally enforceable to punish scenarios like I mentioned before, where a 26-year-old sleeps with a 16 or 15-year-old or 14-year-old or 13-year-old, right? That's why the law exists, to punish those people. That is bad, and it should be punished, and there's no excuse for it, whether they're married or not. And if you do something like that, the vast majority of people in the United States will see you as a creep. And that's not just because it's illegal, it's because they recognize the vast difference on average between a 26-year-old and a 16-year-old. This is a pretty easy thing to adhere to. You can just not bang kids when you're in your mid-20s. It's not that difficult. You can not marry one when you're in mid-20s. It's that simple. They meander around a bit. Sneako is arguing that sex out of wedlock shouldn't happen, but if you marry a 15-year-old and they're mature for their age, that's fine. Like, the idea that a 20-year-old banging an 18-year-old is worse than a 20-year-old banging a 13-year-old because one of them is out of wedlock is so retarded. This guy's a fucking moron. But Charlie brings it back once again to Sneako's personal beliefs around the subject.
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for, I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore, anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Well, because the government is right sometimes, actually. Sometimes people do dumb stuff. Sometimes people do evil stuff. If someone wants to kill someone else, why should we let the government get involved? Well, because murder is wrong. If the person being murdered consents to it, if they want to die and want to allow another person to kill them, we should just let it happen, right? I mean, they're consenting. No, of course not, because there is an inherent harm in the action of taking someone's life. You are letting a person who is clearly mentally effed up in the head die because they have no will to live, and you're allowing a sick person to murder them. That is wrong. You cannot reasonably consent to being killed, just like you can't reasonably consent to having sex as a child. And this is such an easy thing to understand. And as for the argument of parents allowing it, yeah, some parents are morons. Some parents will allow their child to be exploited by an adult, but just because they don't think that there's anything wrong doesn't mean we shouldn't set societal standards or have a kind of law in place so that enforcers can punish that person and stop the harm from taking place. Sneako himself may not be molesting kids, but he is arguing for some horrible shit right now, and he needs to be called out for that. He's sounding more and more like Amos Yee every day.
If everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
But they're still, like, they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that. Like, do you think
okay, so now it's
sophomore
sophomore in high school versus senior in high school. What's the difference? Like, what's the difference maturity-wise?
I'm just saying, like, I'm giving you a perspective on where that age would be in life. Like, they can't consent to something like that.
That's probably you're bringing up an outlier that's probably not going to happen as much. I'm saying that these are arbitrary reasons to say, like, a sophomore versus a senior in high school. How much different were you really maturity wise?
Yeah, and a sophomore is 15 or 16 and a senior in high school is 17 or 18. I wouldn't say that somebody who is a senior and a sophomore is a pedophile. And if you do personally think that it's creepy or weird, then I don't think it should be held against them for the rest of their life. I would, however, say that somebody who's 21 in the United States, who's about to finish college, and someone who is 15 years old, who's still at the beginning of high school, relatively speaking, should not be dating because of the large maturity gap. This is pretty simple to understand, I think, and to be honest, Charlie doesn't do an amazing job of explaining himself here. Sneako is kind of steamrolling him.
It wasn't that much of a difference. The reason that you keep saying 18 is because in California, where they post Hollywood movies, it's 18. And so everybody across the world, this is the standard that we believe in. This is the correct age, exactly on the dot. And if it's anything under that, are you going to say here that if a 21-year-old got married to a 17-year-old who was almost 18, is that 21-year-old a pedophile?
I would say that is a morally bad thing to do for sure.
Not morally bad. Not morally bad. Is that?
I wouldn't call it. No, I wouldn't call them a.
So when does somebody become a pedophile?
I would say when you have this position, you are.
You're not answering the question.
And you are. I'm explaining it.
Okay.
When you are in your 20s and you start preying upon someone who is still a child, a 15, 16, 14, anything under 18, a 21 and a 17-year-old.
But you still haven't specifically defined what a child is.
I did.
So then why? Okay, there you go. So if pedophile is love of children, and your definition of adult starts at 18, if the 21-year-old marries a 17-year-old who's turning 18 tomorrow, he is a pedophile based off your definition.
As I said, if he would wait, he would not be. Then yeah,
well, not wait. Based off your definition, that person's
in that position. There is no reason to not wait for the legally established, agreed upon definition of when you stop being a child.
And this is where Charlie gets himself into some serious hot water because he has a very hard time defining what is a child and what is not. For example, I defended Call Me Carson for the allegations made against him, which at worst, from what we know, is that he is a 19-year-old sexted a 17-year-old. This is potentially illegal in some places by Charlie's standards. Do I care? No. The same way that I don't care about a 20-year-old dating an 18-year-old. Sneako is not right that the law doesn't matter, but he is right to say that the way Charlie is arguing about it makes it kind of arbitrary, and he does not make a very good case for where his moral foundations lie. I know I sound like a giant spurg right now because I'm like analyzing this as like a debate bro, whatever, but really Charlie just does not do an amazing job here, and you can't claim he did. I think even he would realize that. And Charlie once again makes the mistake here of not being able to explain why he thinks something is wrong.
Tomorrow, if the US government legalized bestiality, if the government legalized incest, based off your logic, there'd be no reason why that's wrong. Can I ask you, Moise, do you think that incest is wrong?
Yes.
Why is incest wrong?
There is under no circumstances any excuse for anyone of the same bloodline to be romantic like that, by no means at all.
Why?
I really think it should be pretty obvious why.
I don't know why. I'm asking you.
I know where you're going with this because I've heard this argument from another streamer before about like the ethics of incest. If they don't have a kid and thus don't pass down like bad genes that lead to a bad child. I've heard this before.
But I want to hear your answer, because are we going with legal or are we going to follow some sort of morality,
it is
some
both.
sort of consistent morality? Why is incest wrong?
Incest is wrong because I believe that no family dynamic should ever include a sexual relation.
Why?
I don't think that. Because it is not healthy. It is a bad thing to do. It is a horrible thing to subject someone to.
But why is it horrible? Because who told you that?
It's what I believe. And also, if you do have a child with your own kin, the child suffers.
Okay, but say it's two brothers, two gay brothers. Chris Tyson and other Chris Tyson and Chris. If they're two brothers and they decide to be in a no, genuine question. It's what you believe in. I want to figure out where your beliefs come from. You personally believe that.
My beliefs come from a place of what I believe to be moral, where I don't believe that anyone in the same family has any position to be romantic with one another. I don't think that that's a
your
healthy
morality
dynamic.
comes from yourself?
My morality comes from like the world around me. I don't have.
Okay, so if the morality comes from the world around you, then by your logic, if you lived in America in the 1800s where the age of 10 was okay and where the age of 7 was okay in England just 200 years ago, if you followed the world around you, that would be okay. That was fine.
And it's not now because we've evolved past them.
Now, I think one of the main things getting critical caught up here is that he's not a debate streamer. He's not someone who spends a lot of time thinking about their beliefs and their morality. So when he has to talk to someone like Sneako, who, as dumb as he is, has spent a little more time than Charlie thinking about his beliefs and studying how he can justify banging a kid, he looks bad. Straight up, he does look bad. But I don't think that just because the guy debating won a debate means that they're right. It means he knows how to justify his position, whereas Charlie does not. He's just a normal dude that accepts the morality of the world around him, which he says himself here. And beyond that, I don't think he spends a lot of time thinking about why he feels the way that he feels. I think this is where one of the biggest points of criticism comes from regarding the Penguinz0 channel in general. He's like a lightning rod for the most commonly accepted take about any situation. On one hand, that's why his channel is so successful, but it's also why people hate him. He's not someone who spends hours and hours thinking about how he feels. He just turns on his camera, records his take, and leaves it at that off the cuff. If anything, this debate has shown me that if nothing else, he's honestly saying what he believes, but it also shows that he has a hard time justifying evenly commonly accepted positions when pressed on them. And that's why Sneako was able to get him to justify children transitioning. And this is not even a joke or something ironic that I'm saying. Charlie did do that.
Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting, as you agree with.
You can just see Sneako's glee as he realizes how bad this is for Charlie. Look, man, there's just there's no circumstance under which a 9-year-old should be able to have a doctor cut their dick off, regardless of what the parents think. If Charlie is going to make the argument that minors cannot consent to sex, then he can't also make the argument that they can consent to life-changing, irreversible gender surgery for all of time that they'll never be able to get back.
Okay, so as long as everyone...
If your parents are okay with it and you are okay with it, I think that's totally a familial decision to make. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just contrast what Charlie just said with what Sneako just said.
So if you have someone that's your age coming in saying, I want to marry that child, I don't think that can happen under any circumstance.
So
no.
But it's still a personal decision. You're still deciding.
Like, both of these people are basically saying the same thing, but Charlie is arguing in favor of kids transitioning, and Sneako is arguing in favor of kids getting groomed.
So if you have someone that's your age coming in saying, I want to marry that child, I don't think that can happen under any circumstance.
I think this debate is really a horrible look for both of them, but I'm slightly more disappointed in Charlie because I hated Sneako from the outset, and biting this kind of bullet for Charlie is a really bad look all around. I do not know why he decided to say that. Obviously, there are some people that are going to be supportive of that position. I think they're wrong. And the amount of people that are now going to use this to show that he's protecting people like Chris Tyson, given the fact he's justifying a 9-year-old getting life-changing surgery because their parents think it's okay is, well, a lot of people are going to say that, and it's hard to argue with them at this moment. Now, I don't think that Charlie is protecting Chris Tyson, but these people are going to use this clip to show that. It's going to be taken out of context forever till the end of time, and it's going to make a lot of people in his audience, if they see this, really not like him. Now, unfortunately for Sneako, he then brings it back around to make himself look bad as well.
Because there's
take the other party out of the equation. It's a personal
decision.
If I'm 16 and I personally want to marry this girl, she's beautiful, she's 21 years old, her family wants to do it, my family wants to do it. You're saying I can't do that. We're both consenting. I'm ready to go. I'm physically mature, but I'm not allowed to marry because Moy says that woman's a pedophile. But if then The next day, I leave it, I'm depressed. I want to cut my penis off. I can go right into the clinic, snip it off, and start taking HRT like Chris Tyson. That's a society that makes sense to you?
It is. I believe
okay.
everyone has I believe everyone has the right to do with their body what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has the right to do what they want when they are adults. We wouldn't say a kid can just take a bunch of drugs because that's what they want to do. We wouldn't say a fucking 13-year-old can drink alcohol. Why? Well, because they're too young to understand the short-term and long-term effects of drug use. In the same way that we wouldn't say they consent to sex. And in the same way, we shouldn't be saying they should be able to go to the doctor and get their whole thing snipped off. That is just really dumb. And even outside of taking that position, Charlie just had a very hard time explaining his rationale for his own position, and it was not a good look.
Do words need to have definitions?
Yes, and so does the age of consent.
When we use the English language, should the words that we use match the definition of the word?
Yes.
Yes? You're not doing that.
You don't want statutory. We won't use colloquialism.
There you go.
It's
So
statutory rape.
within this conversation, you change it.
Whereas Sneako, as wrong as he was, had a much easier time and appeared a lot more confident. Honestly, I think Charlie came into this debate relatively unprepared, and Sneako was way more prepared. So when Sneako debates someone who's never had a debate in their life, he's going to steamroll them. But the problem, even outside of that, is that Charlie said what he said about children transitioning, and I don't agree with that. I just don't. Man, yeah. Jesus. Overall, this was a pretty entertaining debate, so I hope more of them happen, but realistically, I think Critical needs to be more prepared if he's going to have debates like this. I don't like that he took that position. I hope he changes his mind or something. If he doesn't prepare in the future for debates like this, Sneako or whoever else is going to steamroll him, as wrong as they are about the age of consent. Now, I'm curious to see what you guys think in the comment section below. I know this is like the most contentious topics in the world right now, the stuff they're discussing, so I'm curious to see what you guys thought. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with Charlie? Do you agree with Sneako? What did you think? Honestly, I think both of them argued from pretty bad positions right here. Charlie, not so much from the start, but once he made that other claim, I was like, bro, no. That in and of itself shows that you are almost as inconsistent as Sneako, in my opinion. But in fairness, after the conversation, Charlie said that he thought that they were speaking in hypotheticals during the part about the child transitioning, so maybe he didn't actually mean it. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he'll make a video clarifying this or something, because if he doesn't believe that 9-year-olds should get their, or should be allowed by their parents to get their, dicks cut off, then he should probably clarify that at some point, I think. That'll probably be a good clarification to post. Yeah.
You can get therapy. You can go through the process of making that decision. I thought that's what it was. I thought he was just speaking in hyperbole with the dick cutting off. I thought that's what we were talking about. And then if you decide that's the path you want to take, it is your body. You can do that. You can make that decision once you become of age to make a decision like that. I just don't understand how it got so muddled. Half of the conversation was hyperbole, and apparently that one was literal. Or it's a very malicious attack on what I'm trying to say, or misunderstanding. I don't know. But I think I'm just going to call it there. All right. Take it easy. Have a good night. See ya.
But yeah, if you like the video, leave a like. Dislike if you disliked it. Retweet, whatever. Bye.